Hi, everybody. Welcome back to GMAT Club. I'm joined today by Melody Jones, founder of Vantage Point MBA. And our topic is one that every applicant really struggles with, I guess, which is how do you actually stand out? So Melody was here recently with the topic of the art of selecting the right business schools for MBA, which we've done a month or two ago. You can check out that video. We're going to link it in the chat below so that you don't miss it. But Melody, it's great to have you back. Thanks so much for, taking up this topic. I think it's a very important one. And I'm excited to hear your thoughts. But you can reintroduce yourself, I guess, for our new audience members.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm excited to talk about, like you said, this very important topic. So I'm Melody Jones, and I'm the founder and president of Vantage Point MBA Admissions Consulting. We are a premier admissions consulting firm that works one-on-one with applicants who are applying primarily to the M7 programs and guide them through the entirety of the application process and help them overachieve with their acceptances.
Awesome. All right, well, now let's, I guess, start with a quick question. When an AdCom talks about an applicant having an edge, what do they actually mean? Like, what does it not mean as well?
Yes. I love that you started off asking this question because, an edge is not something that you have or don't have, right? It's not a thing that either you possess or you don't possess. It is something that every applicant has the potential to bring to the table. And it's oftentimes much less obvious, or I would say much less prominent when you think about your profile and you think about your resume than you might expect going into the application process. I was actually on a Stanford info session last week, and I loved what the Stanford rep said about what Stanford is looking for. So for context, Stanford is the most competitive MBA program to get into in terms of acceptance rates. And what she said is, we're not necessarily looking for people who have done extraordinary things, right? We're looking for people who have done ordinary things in extraordinary ways.
Oh, that's nice.
And I love that framing because that is exactly what we've seen to be the case, over a decade of advising applicants, is the folks that are successful in this process. Yes, some of them have done extraordinary things, of course, but that is not the only way to get into an MBA program. It really is about knowing yourself, knowing what you do in the unique way that you do it, unique way that you see things, the unique way that you think, how you feel, and then having the self-awareness to express that in a simple way that enables your reader to understand, and most importantly, to picture you, right, as a part of their community, and to picture you being successful in achieving those goals that you're setting after in business school and beyond. So it really is about developing a distinctive voice and understanding what is a story that only you can tell because of your unique set of experiences and circumstances, yes, but your worldview, your perspective, and your skills.
Awesome. Now, could you give, I guess, a few examples of edges that worked, including ones from a candidate who looked ordinary on paper?
Yeah, of course. And here's the great thing about it is that, every candidate can look ordinary on paper and can look exceptional on paper. I truly believe that. I've seen that to be the case time and time again. A couple of examples, it could be a consultant, right? There are a lot of consultants that apply to business school, but maybe they've worked on cases in a particularly innovative or pioneering group within their company. I'm thinking of one client, for instance, who worked at Deloitte, but he also was their first junior hire in their aerospace and defense practice several years ago. And so had some really interesting experiences, not just as a consultant, but also on building out a practice area, right? And being an early hire in an otherwise, very established organization, and what it meant to kind of establish credibility in a new segment and the role that he played in that. That's one example. Another one could be, an applicant who worked in finance, right? Did the typical 2 years of banking, 2 years to PE. But a story that we uncovered that was really meaningful to him was actually back in college. He played football. He was on the college football team. And when he joined the football team, as you can imagine is the case in many American universities, academics aren't a priority. And he felt that academics should be a priority and that the football team had an opportunity to really create and set a new standard for the student athlete on campus. And so he established a tutoring program and then ultimately got university funding for an entire athletic department tutoring program that he led. And so again, he talked about that as examples of leadership that would help set him apart from other finance applicants or PE applicants. Of course, there's others more distinctive, like one client that I will never forget, wrote about the hustle that he really learned from unique circumstances growing up. So he had an incarcerated parent. And of course, the other parent that he lived with was very busy. He was trying to make ends meet for their family. And so he became very enterprising at a young age, and how that sort of gumption and hustle led him to outperform in his career because he never let that first no be the final answer.
Oh, is it like this? Is it like Matilda?
Kind of, yeah. Yeah.
Why does that story feel familiar?
Well, I think Matilda just had bad parents, right? Her dad was like, I think he was a used car salesman who was fraudulent, and her mom just watched telenovelas all day. But
how does someone like Matilda know they have an edge? When you're so brilliant.
Well, and honestly, and this is going to sound very self-congratulatory, but so many of our clients don't actually know they have an edge until they have a thought partner, like a consultant, or it can also be, a close friend or a mentor who really has the time and bandwidth to invest in their application process, to shine a mirror up on their experiences and say, no, John, no, Sarah, I know you feel like this was just ordinary for you, but trust me, I have worked with many individuals that are in your shoes, and what you did was not ordinary. That was not normal. You did this differently. You did this in a special way because you are you. And so let's bring that to life in your applications.
Correct.
Right? What are your values? Values are that was kind of going to be my last example to share, is values that you live every single day that shape your actions, shape how you interact with others, and shape your choices. That can be a tremendously powerful way to gain an edge, because those are going to be true to you no matter which circumstances you find yourself in. And again, that makes it easy for the AdCom to really understand what that means for you as a potential student, as a potential member of their community, and of course, how you'll represent the institution beyond graduation.
Do you think there is a particular question one can ask themselves to understand if they have an edge or not? Like, of course, everybody would, but for certain schools, I think the level of the edge maybe matters a bit more, or no?
I don't think that your story is different based on which schools you're applying to, but certainly how you tell your story, what you choose to emphasize, is very much driven by that school, right? By the particular essay questions they ask. That's very telling, but also on that program's like unique elements of culture and fit and values, et cetera. So yes, I think there are certainly nuances, but the core remains the same. In terms of questions, I wish there was one kind of magical unlock question. When we work with clients, the first exercise we have them work through is actually a 3-page questionnaire where we dive into all sorts of background questions, literally, hunting around everything in their life, professional, personal, childhood, family, et cetera. That said, I think a great place to start if you're working through this process on your own is just to go back to the beginning and think through key inflection points. What were key decisions where you could have gone left or gone right? And why did you make the choice you did? What were the factors at play? What were kind of pivotal moments for you where you learned something, or where it changed your perspective on something, or a relationship that maybe unlocked something for you? And I think starting to take inventory of all of those. So just write everything down, almost like a journaling exercise. And then step away from it, right? When you're so down in the weeds, it's really hard to understand what are the common themes or common threads. Step away from it and then come back to it. And then ask yourself, okay, what are the recurring themes here that are coming up over and over again? What is this saying about myself and what I value, what I prioritize, what my strengths are? and continue to dig that way until you ultimately identify, all right, this is something that I can really own. Like, this is my lane. And it's something that's been the case in my personal life, my professional life, right? Extracurriculars, anything where I show up.
Interesting. Now, if someone who's coming from an overrepresented pool, like same job title, industry, and stats as thousands of others, how heavily would they have to rely on their hobbies, their extracurriculars to really stand out in their application?
I will say it becomes more important. There are certainly, like I mentioned earlier, there are certainly ways for your work experience to make you shine. And I talk about this a lot with, for example, my PE and consulting clients, right? Because they're already exceptional performers, right? It is that exceptional performance and intellect and work ethic that got them where they are in their career. But then how do they shine amongst a peer group that also cleared those bars? And so it can be, once again, around how do you shine above and beyond your peers doing the ordinary things of your job, right? Are you that person that stays extra late with a teammate when they're struggling with something to help them, get through a deadline, or to help them tackle a project that they're getting stuck on, right? Are you really that team player that just can't help themselves but to be that person that will be the teacher and the mentor and the helper? That could be one thing, right? Are you somebody that always sees opportunities to improve processes? Maybe something's very manual in your organization and you're like, okay, we could continue to spend 10 hours a week doing this, or I could take 40 hours up front and build out something that will automate this and make it easier for everyone going forward, right? Are you that person? So really trying to understand who you are as a teammate and as an employee and as a professional that makes an outstanding difference. That said, extracurriculars are also a really important way where you can showcase a different edge. And I think another piece of it too is that when you're working in these really demanding jobs, even making time for extracurriculars and making time for community impact says a lot about your character, right? Because you are already balancing an incredibly busy schedule, but you still find creative ways to carve out the time towards things that you care about. And those things can be anything, right? There's no right or wrong answer about what that thing is, but it should be genuine. And it should be something that you spend your time doing it because you love it.
Correct. I want to ask that, does it matter what kind of extracurriculars, you have, while you are working and studying? Does one extracurricular matter more than another? Will charity work look better than, I don't know, starting a book club, so to speak?
Yes, I'm going to say yes and no. I think that the extracurriculars that will be the strongest sort of additives to your MBA application are those, once again, that reflect genuine passion, genuine commitment, and require, true effort on your part. And where you've also had an impact, right? It's not about just showing up and volunteering and checking a box, but where you've really gone above and beyond to make a difference, to drive change, to really drive progress towards a cause or a mission that you care about. That said, I will say that things that are just easier to do are going to be less impactful in your application. And by that, I mean, again, I'm going to pick on my consultant clients or applicants for a minute, right? Almost all of my consultant applicants are involved in some sort of internal initiatives, right? Whether it's an employee resource group, whether it's an organization that's pushing for advocacy for junior talent, for example, right? Or whether you're creating the onboarding program for new interns. Anything that's internal, that's great. It's so great to see folks that are carving out time beyond the demands of their job to invest in their organizations, invest in their teams. That said, everyone's doing it, right? Everyone that works at Deloitte or Bain or BCG or Accenture, they're all involved in something internal. So that in and of itself isn't going to give you an edge, but maybe how you've gone about it or what you've done with that position or that role, that could be exceptional. But I do think, again, in those environments, things outside of work just make that much more of a difference because they require a lot more effort, a lot more intentionality, and a lot stricter time management.
Interesting. Okay. Now, a few more questions I had was regarding timeline. So how
Yeah.
early do you think this work should start? And for someone staring at a deadline this cycle, what can be done realistically now versus what needs a year?
Right, right. I've been talking about extracurriculars till I'm blue in the face since literally January of this year, because it is one of those things that takes more time to really ramp up and to make a difference, right? You can't wake up tomorrow and say, I'm going to go sit on a junior board of this organization that I care about, right? It doesn't work that way. And so there's so much of this does take a much longer time to build up to and to make a difference. Things don't happen overnight. That said, if you are finding yourself, having already started the application process, you are aiming for round one and that's not changing. My recommendation is to take inventory of what you're already doing and see if you can do more of it. Can you do more of it? Can you do it better? Is there, an opportunity that you already have that you can maximize further, so that it's really just kind of hitting the gas on something you're already doing, as opposed to trying to start something fresh. I think starting something fresh at this stage in the game, particularly if you're applying in round one, is certainly not impossible, but might be tough unless you already have relationships with organizations or with individuals that can help give you those opportunities.
Interesting. Okay. Now, where do you think an edge sits relative to the rest of the application? Like, can a strong edge carry a weaker GPA or test score, or does it only matter once you clear the bar?
I wish I could give you a black or white answer to that. I really do. I'm going to say this out of the risk of sounding cliche. MBA admissions really is holistic. They are looking at the entirety of your application profile. Now, can, exceptional leadership, a track record of leadership and impact, both, through your professional endeavors and extracurriculars, can that kind of tip you over the edge on a cuspy or questionable academic profile? It's possible. Anything is possible. And I've certainly seen it happen. There are no guarantees, though. There are no guarantees. And ultimately, your job as an applicant is to bring it, right? Put your best foot forward at every single component of the application. And that includes, your test scores. Yes, obviously your academic track record is baked now. And so if you do have a lower GPA, can you expect, great extracurriculars to carry you? No, it most likely won't happen. But if you take the GRE or the GMAT and you do exceptionally well, and then you have all of these other components of the application process working hard for you, and your letters of recommendation are also, of course, supporting, right, the values and the character and the exceptional things that you're highlighting in your side of the application, that can certainly help tip the scales in your favor.
Oh, that makes sense. Do you also think the same edge lands differently at different schools? Like, is something that works at one program a poor fit for another?
So I wouldn't say it is a poor fit, but I certainly think that, something might resonate more with some schools than others, but also relative to the overall applicant pool, right? So it's not that, Michigan Ross is looking for X and Harvard is looking for Y. That's not the case, right? All top MBA programs are looking for the same set of qualities and indicators of future success. But what I will say is that it might speak to a certain school's like values or cultural elements more than others. And depending on who your competition is, right, depending on who else is applying to those programs, it might be easier or harder to stand out with what you bring to the table.
Interesting. And there's no way to reframe your edge. Like, it's not necessary, correct, for different schools, or is it?
Again, I think it depends on which schools you're talking about and what are the essay questions, right? What are those programs looking for? And what do you choose to emphasize? So reframing is probably the proper way to talk about it, right? Something that you really emphasized in what matters most to you and why might not be as front and center in a Columbia essay, which is much more professionally focused, right? And a little bit more pragmatic. And so will it still be a part of your application? Absolutely. But is it front and center in the same way that it is in one application versus another? Maybe not. Again, that is really the art of the application process. And that's really where you have to sit down and understand how can you best position your experience and your profile, given what each school is looking for and given what real estate you have and opportunities you have in that school's application to bring that forward.
Makes sense. Now, when someone has found their edge, what do you think is the most common mistake in how they, bring it into their essays and their resume?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I just want to say, when you find your edge, when you realize like, oh my God, this is what makes me special. I mean, that's pure magic.
Yeah.
Like that light bulb, that aha moment, that's something that, we as consultants are a part of a lot. And it's incredible. It's incredible to see that confidence boost and say, okay, like this can actually happen for me. So I just want to put that out there that if you haven't found your edge yet, that doesn't mean that you're not unique. It just means you need to continue to dig, continue to self-reflect, and maybe possibly give yourself an extra year.
Yeah.
But sorry, going back to the question at hand, I forgot what it was.
What do you think are some of the common mistakes on how they weave it into resume and essay?
Common mistakes, yes. And I think you touched on it earlier. I think the common mistake is just thinking that's going to carry you, right? And thinking that that's the only thing that matters about you, right? Like, yes, your brand, your theme, your story, there's a lot of different ways to kind of name what that thing is. I mean, that is the crux, that is the core of your application. All that said, that is not the only thing that matters. And you want to make sure that all of the different pieces of your profile and of your application are reinforcing that without repeating it overtly, right? You want to come off as so unidimensional that it's too narrow, and there's not enough flexibility and not enough potential there to lean into.
Do you have an example of an edge that backfired, or a client that almost leaned on that you steered them away from?
I think probably the Stanford application is a good example of that. I can't think of someone who necessarily, you know what? I think that this particular applicant wanted to really lean into a story about college, also a sports story. In this case, it was a tennis team, where they were able to sort of rally like a ragtag team of club tennis players into winning a championship that year. And they were and just talking about motivating people, et cetera. And that was an exceptional story, of course, and a huge part of their application. But I think this candidate really just wanted to only talk about that and what matters most to you and why, to be all about just that one story. And while there was certainly enough to dig into and enough to unpack that they could have filled the full 650 words, ultimately, because it was college, I really encourage them to also bring in other experiences that were more recent and more relevant to them and their identity now as a professional. Mm-hmm. And so it was just helping them sort of balance the real estate and balance the focus so that they were bringing in this theme as a pattern versus just something that they did once like 5 or 6 years ago.
Makes sense. Okay. So, but otherwise, not that many that come to mind, which is kind of a good thing. That means
it's hard to go right. I mean, the wrong thing you would do, honestly, is to just try to like throw in the whole kitchen sink and hope that the AdCom finds your edge, right? Finds that needle in a haystack. That is a mistake, and I see that a lot. I see applicants that even when they're trying to answer a simple question like, "What are your career goals?" are talking about, every single decision they made from why they chose their college major all the way up until where they are today in their career and then how that led them to their future. And that's not what the question's asking, right? The question wants a simple why, and then you want to lead right into how that led you to your goals. And so being able to distill that into just as much as you decide what to include, also decide what to exclude. I think that is a big mistake that applicants make, is there's so much pressure on this process, right? And they're so eager to get it right. They're like, I'm going to just include everything and hope that the outcome finds what they're looking for. And the problem is when you try to include everything, you stand for nothing at all. And that's what gets you sort of lost in the shuffle.
That's true. For international applicants, do you think standing out works differently in a US pool?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think, again, international applicants are also being evaluated versus their peers, right? And also versus the overall applicant pool, right? It's very much collective. And so I don't necessarily think that the evaluation changes. I do think context matters, right? And there are certainly some cultures more than others where extracurriculars are a big part of the culture, and they're not necessarily a big part of the culture in other places. And so it's understanding what you've done and what you've been involved in the context of cultural norms. And so you as an applicant, yes, you want to rely a little bit on the AdCom's knowledge and experience, but you also want to give them that context and help explain the broader environment in which you are operating, so that what your achievements are, it's easy for them to understand why they were exceptional and why they mattered. Even if you'd popped them into a different geography or a different context, it might have looked different.
Interesting. Okay. And for re-applicants, how do they rethink their edge the second time around normally?
Yes, it really depends on where you might have fallen short or where you tripped up in the last application, right? And not every reapplicant, by the way, tripped up. So I want to be clear about that. But we would always start with evaluating, what their prior application looked like and where you might have fallen short. I think a lot of times it's probably a lack of clearly defined edge. If you've already clarified that edge and you actually did a great job of it, then it's about bringing in new examples that help reinforce that and really showing them, okay, I really mean this. And these are the 5 new ways where I've really brought this value to life. Those are probably the 2 different ways that I would recommend approaching that if the edge was really something that was, either lacking or a big part of their strategy last time.
That makes sense. Now, if an applicant takes away one thing from this session about standing out, what do you think it should be?
Oh man, I would say, do the work to really figure out your story and your brand before you start writing essays. The mistake that I see, and I'm not saying that, writing essays cannot be transformative in and of itself and cannot be illuminating in and of itself. Of course, essay writing is iterative. We go through many, many, many drafts of essays with our clients, and these are folks who have already done the legwork up front to get clear on their story and their brand. That said, doing that hard introspective work is so critical to writing great essays, right? You can't write a great essay that answers a very distinct question if you don't really know what the answer is. And if you're tiptoeing around the answer, hoping that maybe by accident you'll land in it. And so do that work up front. Don't fall into the temptation of just diving right into the first story that comes into mind with the essays. It's a hard exercise. It's not easy. It's uncomfortable and it can feel frustrating, but it's so worth it. And ultimately, your entire application strategy is going to build on that. And that's going to be the key to sort of unlocking your differentiation and giving yourself the best possible chances, especially at the top programs.
No, of course. But I think we've managed to cover a majority of the questions. And of course, if anybody has any more questions, feel free to put them down in the chat box below. We'd love to answer them, after the live session ends. But Melody, thank you so much. Is there a way, if somebody has difficulty finding their edge, how should they reach out to you?
Yes, we'd love to chat and see if we can help kind of unlock where you're getting stuck. You can find us at vantagepointmba.com. And there's a form on our website you can fill out to request a consultation. And a live human member of our team will be in touch to schedule a call with you where you can talk through more of the specifics live one-on-one.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. This was lovely. And I hope we get to discuss the next part of, this whole process sometime soon.
Absolutely. I'd love that, Selby. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Bye-bye.
Take care.